Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before starting the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and give this video a like up. 23 years ago, Star Trek Enterprise hosted one of the biggest crossovers of Rick Berman's era that Star Trek fans need to see or experience again. Star Trek Enterprise went off the air in 2005 after 4 seasons on UPN United Paramount Network. But the first Star Trek prequel series includes many treasures, like secret crossovers. Star Trek Enterprise's voyages of Captain Jonathan Archer Scott Bakula and the NX-01 Enterprise came at the tail end of executive producer Rick Berman's stewardship of the Star Trek franchise, which lasted about 18 years. Enterprise faced issues like franchise fatigue as fans had been inundated with hundreds of hours of Star Trek. However, Star Trek Enterprise often pulled out all the stops, taking advantage of its ties to Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and Star Trek Voyager's roster of actors and creative teams. Rick Berman and his executive producing partner, Brannon Braga, found ways to make Enterprise a foreigner to the TNG era that happens 200 years later. Star Trek Enterprise Season 1's acquisition was a subtle but still epic crossover with famous names from Star Trek, the original series, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and Star Trek Voyager, all playing brand new, greedy Ferengi. Ethan Phillips played Ulis on Star Trek Enterprise. Phillips played Neelix, the Talaxian chef and the USS Voyager's morale officer, for 7 seasons of Star Trek Voyager. Phillips has also popped up elsewhere in Star Trek, like playing a holographic maitre d' in Star Trek First Contact. Jeffrey Combs has played multiple roles throughout Star Trek, including Krem and Enterprise's Hakushin. Combs alternated between playing Ferengi Liquidator Brunt and several versions of the Vorda Weon on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Jeffrey also recurred as the Andorian Commander Shran on Enterprise. Clint Howard was one of the original Star Trek guest stars, playing Balak as a child in the 1960s episode, The Corbomite Maneuver. Howard plays Muck in Star Trek Enterprise, and he returned for another guest role in Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 8, Under the Cloak of War. Matt Malloy played Star Trek Enterprise Acquisition's 4th Ferengi, Grish, a veteran actor with dozens of movie and TV credits. Malloy is the only one of the 4 Ferengi actors who hadn't appeared in Star Trek before or since. Star Trek Enterprise bringing in 3 major actors from previous Star Trek generations and introducing the Ferengi into Enterprise's 22nd century canon should have been a bigger deal than it was, or how it's remembered by Star Trek fans. A downside of hiding a gaggle of famous faces under Ferengi makeup and prosthetics is that it undermined the impact of having Ethan Phillips, Clint Howard, and Jeffrey Combs guest star on Enterprise together, no matter how recognizable their voices are. Unfortunately for Enterprise, a considerable segment of Star Trek fans didn't check out the prequel show during its first run on UPN, and Enterprise wasn't highly regarded by hardcore Trekkers. In recent years, however, with the advent of streaming and binge-watching Star Trek, Enterprise has found a greater appreciation, with new audiences discovering the show and older fans checking out and enjoying what they missed in the early 2000s. To be fair to Star Trek Enterprise's Hakushin, over 5.2 million watched the episode's first run on UPN in 2002. It's a respectable number, but far below Star Trek The Next Generation's phenomenal ratings when it was in first-run syndication over a decade prior. The crossover Star Trek Enterprise is most famous for its reviled series finale. These are the voyages, in which Star Trek The Next Generation's Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis guest starred as Commander William Riker and Counselor Deanna Troi. Star Trek Enterprise's executive producers intended the series finale to be a love letter to the fans that tied Scott Bakula's prequel to TNG, underscoring the importance of Captain Archer's Enterprise to the greater Star Trek canon. Instead, the endeavor badly backfired, as Enterprise's finale was really an ersatz episode of Star Trek The Next Generation about Commander Riker, with Star Trek Enterprise's cast merely appearing as holograms. For more than half a century, Star Trek has united fans across generations with its timeless vision of the future. From Kirk and Spock's original adventures to the bold explorations of discovery and strange new worlds, the franchise has constantly evolved while remaining a beacon of hope and curiosity. But every now and then, a piece of Trek history gets overlooked, an event so strange, so audacious, that it almost feels like myth. 23 years ago, fans were treated to one of the wildest crossovers in Star Trek history, a moment when universes collided in a way that still sparks heated conversations to this day. This wasn't your typical Federation meets Federation story. No, this was something bigger, something that broke down the walls between franchises and dared to ask, what if Starfleet wasn't alone in the pop culture galaxy? The year was 2002. Trek at a crossroads. To understand why this crossover matters, we need to rewind to 2002. It was a pivotal time for the franchise. Star Trek Voyager had just wrapped its 7-season run, sending Captain Janeway and her crew triumphantly back to Earth after years in the Delta Quadrant. Star Trek Enterprise was still in its infancy, experimenting with prequel storytelling that divided longtime fans. Meanwhile, in theaters, Star Trek Nemesis loomed on the horizon, destined to disappoint both critically and commercially. This transitional moment left fans craving something bold, something fresh to remind them why they loved Trek in the first place. And that's when it happened. A crossover that no one saw coming. Starfleet Meets the Future, the epic crossover, unveiled. The event took place on UPN, remember that network? Which at the time was both airing Enterprise and experimenting with programming stunts to grab attention. To celebrate Star Trek's enduring cultural footprint, UPN orchestrated a bizarre but delightful crossover. A special television block in which characters from Star Trek would collide with characters from other UPN shows. The most famous and infamous example? The crossover between Star Trek Enterprise and WWE SmackDown. Yes, you read that right. In 2002, to promote both Enterprise and professional wrestling on the same network, UPN aired a surreal sketch where wrestlers like The Rock and Triple H exchanged dialogue with Starfleet officers in promotional bumpers. Jonathan Archer Scott Bakula was seen giving an awkward briefing about strange new SmackDowns, while wrestlers threatened to body slam alien invaders. It was campy, clunky, and utterly unforgettable. And while some fans cringed, others recognized it as pure fun, a moment when Star Trek, usually so serious, allowed itself to play in the larger sandbox of pop culture. But that wasn't the only crossover. While the wrestling tie-in grabbed headlines, another lesser-known but far more fascinating crossover happened the same year. A comic book storyline that brought Star Trek together with the X-Men, published by Marvel in the late 90s, but still a hot topic among fans in 2002. This story arc featured Captain Kirk's crew teaming up with mutants like Wolverine and Storm to stop a cosmic threat. If the wrestling promo was silly marketing, the Star Trek/X-Men comics were pure creative experimentation. They explored what would happen if the Federation's ideals of diplomacy collided with the X-Men's struggle for survival and acceptance. The highlight? Spock and Professor Xavier engaging in a mind meld of sorts, exploring each other's philosophies about logic, emotion, and the nature of evolution. It was the kind of storytelling that only crossovers can provide. Two vastly different worlds finding common ground in the shared fight for a better tomorrow. Why this crossover still matters. It's easy to dismiss these events as gimmicks. After all, how seriously can we take the image of Klingons squaring off in a wrestling ring? But the truth is, these crossovers remind us of something essential about Star Trek, its flexibility. Unlike other franchises locked into rigid mythologies, Star Trek has always thrived on reinvention. It can be cerebral, The Next Generation, gritty Deep Space Nine, adventurous Voyager, or comedic Lower Decks. So why not playful crossovers? These experiments show that Trek is bigger than the sum of its parts. It's not just a single canon. It's a cultural touchstone that can interact with superheroes, wrestlers, and even sitcom characters without losing its identity. The fandom reaction. Then and now. Back in 2002, fan forums were ablaze with debate. Some thought the wrestling promos were the lowest point in Trek history, cheapening a legacy built on science and philosophy. Others defended it, arguing that Trek had always embraced camp, from tribbles to Q's outlandish antics, and this was simply another iteration of that tradition. Today, the memory has softened into something of a cult classic. Clips from the promos circulate on YouTube, drawing both laughter and nostalgia. The X-Men comics, meanwhile, have achieved near mythical status among collectors, representing a time when publishers were willing to take wild creative risks. And interestingly, many modern fans who came aboard with Discovery or Strange New Worlds are discovering these crossovers for the first time, treating them as delightful Easter eggs from an era when Star Trek wasn't afraid to get weird. Could Trek do it again? With Star Trek enjoying a streaming renaissance on Paramount+, the question becomes, could we see another epic crossover in the near future? The possibilities are endless. Imagine Star Trek characters joining the Doctor Who universe for a temporal mystery, a crossover with the Orville, bridging parody and canon in a tongue-in-cheek adventure, even a Marvel or DC tie-in on screen, bringing back the energy of those old comics. Given how much franchises today thrive on multiverse storytelling, it doesn't seem so far-fetched. If anything, the playful stunts of 23 years ago were ahead of their time, laying groundwork for the crossover mania we see everywhere now. The final word, the epic crossover from 23 years ago, whether you remember it as Starfleet trading lines with wrestlers or as Kirk's crew meeting the X-Men, deserves to be celebrated, not forgotten. It captured a unique moment in Star Trek history, when the franchise was at a crossroads and chose to embrace experimentation rather than retreat into safety. For fans, it's a reminder that the true spirit of Star Trek isn't about rigid boundaries, but about exploration, exploring strange new worlds, yes, but also exploring strange new partnerships, new formats, and new cultural mashups. So if you've never seen it, do yourself a favor. Track down those odd UPN promos or pick up a copy of the Star Trek/X-Men comics, because in their own bizarre way, they're as much a part of the Trek legacy as the Prime Directive or Live Long and Prosper. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay with us.